How's it going? And welcome to episode 225 of On the Wire, proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. I am Adam Howe, joined as always by Kevin Hasting. Thanks you all for listening and or watching. Well, I guess if you're watching, you're probably listening. It would be really weird to be watching this with no sound on, but you do you. Kevin, it was a wild ride. I was telling you right before we started recording, my side gig or my other job, I work with the sales team indirectly. And so it was the last day of the month. And for all those who have ever done anything in sales, they know the last day of the month, last day of the quarter, last day of the year is always a big day for, big deals coming through or just quantity of deals coming through. So I had my Slack channel open at work, watching all the deals come through. I had the Discord channel open on the other side of my, on my other computer. And it was a wild, wild ride on Thursday on the 31st for obvious reasons. It was just kind of the blending of both worlds. It was kind of perfect for me. How did you enjoy spending your trade deadline?
It was amazing. I had worked late on Wednesday evening. And so with the time difference, I woke up on Thursday to a lot already happening. Ended up having the most trades we've ever had on deadline day. And it felt like it. It seems like there was quite a bit going on, always something, and nothing was, even if they weren't huge, it just
Mhm.
like there was continuously things going on. And as usual, we were still hearing things a couple hours after the deadline had passed. So, yeah, I had an amazing Thursday. But for me, it was the first half of my day, and it was great. Loved it.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Fair enough. You get to start your day that way. You didn't really just
Yeah.
and 5 o'clock Eastern comes around. You're like, oh, my work day's done. The trade deadline's done. Now what do I do? Here, yours like, let's get it all out of the way in the morning and kind of decompress throughout the course of the afternoon. So
But there
yeah.
was so much, today as I continue to look and throughout the day yesterday, I've went through the list of every trade multiple times. I've went to all the team pages.
Mhm.
I'm still hopping around and still finding things I either forgot that they happened or I'm like, wait a minute, I don't even remember this happening
Yep.
as I'm looking at these roster pages and I've seen them all multiple times. So we all need to continue doing this prior to
Yeah.
Sunday so that we take it all into consideration.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna go through. We're gonna do. This is the one episode a year. Every year, we always do our format just a little bit differently. We're skipping the news. We're skipping the recommendations, and we are gonna go team by team, depth chart by depth chart, and account for all the moves because every single move that is made has rippling effects. Right? We've seen a lot of guys get traded, and then they got demoted. We see other guys get demoted because there were trades that were made. The Rangers just announced that they're sending down Kumar Rocker, for example, even though he just started the other day with the acquisition of Merrill Kelly and what have you. So we talked last week or the week before. We talked about the openings that would be created from trades from the lower teams. And so there's a lot of different things that end up happening. It's not just a player moving from one team to the other and what position they're going to play or what role they're going to have. There's rippling effects across the board. So the best and easiest way to do this is literally just let's see what everybody, and we have the luxury now of recording this more than 24 hours after the deadline's passed. All the transactions have been finalized, rosters have been reset. Most of the players have already either played today on their new teams or this is the best one. So the trade that happened a couple days ago during the doubleheader with Sir Anthony Dominguez was hilarious to me because he got traded in between games of the doubleheader between the teams that were playing the doubleheader. So he went from Baltimore to Toronto and literally just walked from one clubhouse to the other clubhouse and getting razzed by his former Baltimore teammates. But Jose Caballero very similar situation. He got basically pulled from the Tampa Yankees game ultimately because he was traded mid-game. And so it was just literally had to walk from one dugout to the other. He couldn't. It would have been amazing if they had traded for him and it was allowed that he could actually get into the game, that same game on the Yankees as like a pinch runner
Same
or whatever.
ballpark, right?
Yeah, right. And like it's not like he had to travel. That would have been crazy. It would have been very similar to the whole was it Danny Jansen playing for the Red Sox and the Blue Jays, but that was only because that was a delayed game or that got delayed months and months after the fact. But anyway, I digress. We're gonna go through depth chart by depth chart, team by team, and with all the different moves, and then just go over who's got. Again, there's going to be opportunities for more power if you moved into a better position. There's going to be opportunities for more or less stolen bases. We're still going to be able to go through category by category and apply them to the different moves that were made as well. So I'm ready if you are, Kevin. We'll get into as anybody watching sees, or if you're watching this after the fact, I want to give a shout out to Steve Dumright for this amazing article he threw up very quickly at Pitcher List, breaking down all 30 teams following the 2025 MLB trade deadline, the moves that were made, the impact that they make on their teams as well. So shout out to Steve and this great article. Make sure you're going over to pitcherlist.com and reading all of that. Admittedly, probably going to be spending a lot of time on the Fangraphs depth charts pages. It's a very commonly used. Everybody should be pretty aware of the format there. So as you're watching this from home, or if you're not watching and you're just listening, just know that's what we're using as our reference point. So if it sounds like I'm talking about something that you can't see, that's what it is. So Kevin, we're going to go in alphabetical order. Because that's just the easiest thing to do. So because of their name and they don't have a city, we are going to start with the Athletics. They are at the top of the American League here on the chart. And I got the wrong screen up here anyway. But anyway, that's actually fine. These were the moves that the Athletics made in the last 24 hours. And this is actually, this is poignant, right? We talked about how teams made trades, sure, but there's also trickling effects. And you see right at the top today, they brought back JJ Bleday. They both came back from the minors because of the openings that were made. Luis,
do we really happens? We still could see him move into the rotation as we were anticipating. We also now maybe we see him start to get some save opportunities. In either case, he was picked up in most leagues over the past 2-3 weeks, so no longer a lot of availability. But you're definitely going to hold and see. But I don't think I would go spending resources on the other possibilities. If they're out there and they're next to nothing, sure, you throw a dart, but I wouldn't be spending much here, to your point.
Yeah, I mean Sean Newcomb and Michael Keller being the other ones that at least Roster Resource has in the committee. Newcomb being the lefty obviously has the short end of the stick. Is an opportunity, as anybody watching here can see. Not a whole lot of lefty options in the Athletics bullpen at the moment as well. So can't imagine that they're saving the ninth inning for him. Maybe if it happens to be the ninth inning and, there's a bunch of lefties coming up. Sure. Sean Newcomb, maybe it's the obvious choice to close out the game. But that opportunity has to arrive. Only 4 starters in their rotation after JP Sears is sent packing. Oh, surprise, surprise. Luis Severino was not moved. Everybody is shocked. I know. I understand. I know pretty much the only one that really wanted out from that was Luis Severino. And I'm sure the A's would have loved to. Something I didn't consider, but I can't give credit for because I can't remember where I heard this, but The other problem with apparently with losing Louis or trading away Luis Severino is that they only gave him that contract so that they could be above the threshold to actually get the rev share. And if they're not spending enough money, that's the contract. That's the contract that's getting them the money. So they kind of need to keep him or trade for somebody else where they could have eaten some of the contract, I guess. But yeah, what are you expecting anything to come about in that fifth starter spot for the A's?
Well, they're off on Monday, so they don't need a fifth starter until next Saturday. Roster resource has Osvaldo Vito. That's definitely a possibility starting next Saturday at Baltimore. As I just mentioned, quite a few of us were thinking Jack Perkins may be moving in that direction. Obviously, he probably needs, a couple. Yeah, he's went 3 innings often recently, so he might get to 5 if they threw him in there. But I think Vito probably is the favorite to get this spot next weekend. I'd keep an eye on Jack Perkins. And in reality, especially with a team like Oakland, we won't know until they tell us. But like I said, I think Perkins is rostered in most leagues, so not a lot to do there. I'd spend $1 or 2 possibly on Beto for the weekend at Baltimore. Baltimore hasn't been tearing things up. So, in spite of that 16 runs they put up a couple nights ago, it seems like every time I say a team hasn't been scoring a lot of runs, they have one of those games within the last couple days. But yeah, it's probably one of those 2 guys. I would say Vito's probably the favorite, but I wouldn't spend a lot of money here. If you are in a deeper league, if you think you could use whichever one of these guys it ends up being next weekend, yeah, throw $1 or 2 out there, but I wouldn't spend more than that to ensure I get them.
Sure. So, I mean, we talk about this all season. This ballpark is still a AAA ballpark. So the lineup is going to, no matter what kind of shifts and moves they make, the lineup will have some interest to us moving forward. So here, I'm going to switch this up. Their lineup for today, pretty much the same as what we've seen, on and off for the last couple of weeks. It didn't really change a whole lot. Like I mentioned before, Miguel Andujar being the one that got moved, really of any note. But Zach Geloff is still in AAA. JJ Bleday was just called up, but he's not starting today on Friday as we're recording this. So anything of note, really, or do you expect to be of interest? They are on the road all week. For whatever it's worth, they have 6 games. They'll be in LA for 3, and they'll be in, of all places, the opposite of a batter's ballpark in Seattle for the weekend. But anything of note for the Athletics lineup?
I think if you are in desperate need of an outfielder, that will give you probably a decent batting average, has shown moderate power in the minor leagues, none to speak of so far in just 8 games at the major league level. But Carlos Cortez does appear to be in line for this playing time, just until we get Denzel Clark back. All right, Denzel Clark will move back into center field, I believe, and then Lawrence Butler will move back to right field, and Carlos Cortez will be out of a job. And we do expect to get Denzel Clark back in a couple of weeks, but at least for this 1 week, I think Carlos Cortez is viable, won't hurt your batting average, might help it a little bit. Does have some moderate power. At least he's shown that in the minor leagues, and I think he's got the playing time for a week or 2 here.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, let's move on to the next alphabetical order. And I lost my screen. Let's get that back here. Well, we're going to move on to Baltimore, and we're going to go to that one right there. Cool. So Baltimore made a lot of moves in the
Yes,
last
they did.
48 hours. And not just trades, a lot of call-ups, got to call downs, but mostly trades. And then the call-up and call downs that they made were because of the trades that they were able to make. Going all the way back to the 29th, as I mentioned, the Sir Anthony Dominguez trade in the middle. So that, again, we'll start with the bullpen and show you that fact that, it's gone. They lost Felix Bautista. It looks like he's going to be out for an extended period of time, if not the entire season, or, what's left of it. But then losing Sir Anthony Dominguez, and then also trading, who else could move into that role pretty quickly? And so who's left? Who's left?
Census and Rick Graham pitcher list is in agree for now appears to be Corbin Martin. So that is somebody who wasn't winning any more games than.
No.
And I'm saying Oakland, the Athletics,
Yes.
excuse me. So kind of that same question comes to mind. How much do we want to spend here? Me, not much. But Corbin Martin would definitely be in the waterfall if I'm looking for saves.
Sure. Still 4 guys left in the rotation. Cade Povich is making his way back with some rehab starts. Excuse me. Charlie Morton was the one traded to Detroit. So leaving a 5th spot open, at least at the moment, according to Roster Resource. What kind of expectations do you have to fill that spot? And do you have any interest in whoever does?
Man, I did have interest earlier in the year, and I'm still intrigued by Brandon Young, and I think that's who we're going to see on Sunday pitch against the Cubs, and then next weekend. He would get the Athletics in Baltimore next weekend. So if he looks better than what we've seen earlier in the season versus the Cubs on Sunday, I might have interest in Brandon Young. I think it'll be him. They've went to him multiple times when they've needed a starter this season. I think they'll continue to do so. I think he's better than what we saw in his first trip through major league lineups, and I would have some interest getting the Athletics away from West Sacramento next weekend, depending on what we see him do versus the Cubs on Sunday. I really do think it probably is. I'm fairly certain it's Brandon Young.
Not a whole. I mean, they made a lot of moves, and we expected Ramon Laureano to be one of those traded. Ryan O'Hearn. So there are a couple of. We see a new lineup today on their first day after the trade deadline, but a lot of with Jeremiah Jackson being really the only being called up.
Already had begun to see Kobe Mayo get more playing time earlier in the week, even versus lefties and righties. And now, including Friday, he has been in the lineup 5 of the last 6 games. So I think they were already anticipating, these guys are going to be gone. We're going to see what Kobe Mayo can do the rest of this season. Let's get a little head start on that earlier this past week. So I think that leads me to believe that the playing time for Kobe Mayo is safe going forward. And that's the biggest thing here. Adley Rutschman came back, so we'll see him probably DH some days as well. And that's when Alex Jackson gets his starts at catcher the biggest thing I see here is Kobe Mayo is probably going to get some nice run. They brought Dylan Carlson back up a couple of weeks ago, and now he has started the last 2 games, and they may need him for the foreseeable future in the outfield until they finally decide to give some of these other young guys another shot there in Baltimore.
Yeah, one of the other, he's not here on the roster yet, but Dylan Beavers is supposedly joining the roster as well over the weekend. or at least expected to by some that are following the team closer than me. So there would be another mouth to feed in that outfield if those rumors are true as well. I mean, he's been killing it in AAA all season, knocking down the door. If he does get that call and makes his debut before Sunday, aka on tomorrow, on Saturday,
Yeah, it needs to be Saturday for us.
how excited would you be, or to open up your wallet for a Dylan Beavers?
Well, opening up the wallet is funny this time of year.
Right.
There's some leagues where we may have too much money at this point. If we missed out on all of the players where we did try to spend a little more than we typically do, if you missed out on the times you went for it, let's say, you probably have more money than you're going to be able to spend the rest of the season. I'd be interested in some of those situations. Also, some of our leagues, nobody has much money left. So put those bids in. This is the time of year you start getting shocked at what there'll be a player go triple digits in one league and you get him for $2 in another. We're at that time of year. So definitely time to yeah, if we would see him on Saturday, I would absolutely have bids on him on Sunday. Unfortunately, I doubt we see it Saturday, but it's definitely worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah, it'll totally be a Sunday debut, and then we get a whole week to see what.
So
they
we get
do.
a whole week, and he goes off, and then only the people that have that money left will be in on him.
Yeah. Of course, forgot to mention, of course, Cedric Mullins being the one giving up a lot of that playing time in center field, being moved to the Mets, and Ramon Urias giving up all that third base time for Kobe Mayo to get added reps in the lineup, or at least possibly added lineup. Ryan O'Hearn giving up the first base side, but Kobe Mayo, has had a history of playing both corners, so he could. There's more avenues for his playing time, as you mentioned earlier as well. But we'll get to the impact on the Mets and on Houston when we get to those rosters.
That's the hard part, Adam. I keep wanting to just go talk about the entire trade, and that would throw us way off in our team by team.
We've only gotten through 2 teams, and I already have to take a quick break. All right, we're back. We gotta get going. Otherwise, we are definitely gonna break our record of how long we can do a podcast, Kevin. Which wouldn't be a terrible thing. I get it, but there is a time difference between you and myself, and I get tired.
Yes.
Yes. So we'll go over to Boston. Made some questionable trades, if I do say so myself as a fan. That's not why we're here. That's not what we're talking. We're just talking about the impact the trades made from our fantasy lens, not how much you spent on 2 months of a pitcher you don't really believe will be a major impact. Regardless, didn't really make a whole lot of moves in the bullpen beyond, bringing in Steven Matz. Obviously not really impacting us fantasy wise. Aroldis Chapman was hurt for a minute there, but has made his way back. And so we're not expecting any moves at the back end of the Boston bullpen. So anybody who really thought that Jordan Hicks could possibly be moved into that role, he hasn't even been performing and proving himself to be a 9th or 8th inning guy at this point with the Red Sox. So I don't think there's really much to talk about with the bullpen there. They did make the moves to add to the rotation with the alluded to Dustin May acquisition. Steven Matz is very much more of a depth piece. Do not expect him in the rotation unless everything goes a wire. And then Cooper Criswell was starting as well. I don't know how long that'll last for, but he is in there as a spot starter today as we are recording. Overall, Dustin May in the rotation now, going 4, 5, 6 innings, do you think, for the Red Sox? He wasn't really doing that for the Dodgers. But how, what's your overall take on Dustin May being with the Red Sox rather than with the Dodgers?
I don't know how deep he'll go into games, but I think he's going to get his 5 innings now. I mean, that really was, he didn't, the reports we got is he didn't necessarily ask to be traded, but he was clamoring to be a starter. And that I guess that wasn't in the cards in Los Angeles, even with all the injuries. They're fairly healthy at the moment, so that may have had some to do with it. But I think we're going to see him get the opportunity to go five. Uh, Criswell, by the way, Adam, 1 earned run in 7 innings, only 4 strikeouts, but a solo home run, the only run he gave up in 7 innings on Friday. That may stick.
Yeah.
I was wondering if Walker Buehler is a casualty here in this rotation. But I do think we're going to see Dustin May. It appears to line up. He's going to be facing my Royals on Wednesday in Boston. And yeah, I think this is a nice landing spot for Dustin May. If he wants to be a part of a rotation and for him to get some consistent run as a starter here.
Yeah. Fair enough. No moves made that impacts their major league lineup. Blaze Jordan being the only positional player that was, only infielder that was traded. But all the positional players that were traded from away from the Red Sox were all minor leaguers, being part of either the Steven Matz or the Dustin May trade. But it was also interesting that James Tibbs III was the one traded. He was not the centerpiece, but he was a big piece coming back from the Giants in the Rafael Devers trade. I'm not going to spend any more time on my team because otherwise I will continue to vent. Let's move on to the Chicago White Sox. You know what? I have to double check all their moves because I feel as though they were a lot quieter than maybe they could have been, or they were. I mean, ultimately pretty quiet. They traded Adrian Hauser, obviously, to the Rays away, and they brought in Curtis Mead. That's pretty much the gist of what they did at the trade deadline itself. So, Adrian Hauser being in the rotation in general for the White Sox, what who's filling that gap? And again, do we care? And I mean, Curtis Mead in Chicago is going to be the major difference to that lineup. So we'll get to that in a second. But overall, the rotation for the White Sox, are you seeing any kind of a shakeup there?
Not really. It's all guys we've at least seen in and out of the rotation this season. They still have Shane Smith, Aaron Sabale, Sean Burke, Davis Martin, Jonathan Cannon. I have still used Sean Burke in leagues on occasion. Shane Smith, depending on matchups. Pretty much any of these guys, depending on matchups, I have had at least some interest at different points throughout the season. But I think these 5 guys are how they go forward. Hopefully for them for the final 2 months of the season.
So Curtis Mead not in the lineup. I'm assuming that trade has been finalized. / he's technically on the roster, but he wasn't even of consideration to put on this lineup update on roster resource. But going into a power hitter going into the south side of Chicago doesn't normally bode well. It's not a it's not a hitter friendly ballpark for power hitters. In general, bottom 5 from what we have over at Pitcher List for park factors. So playing time should be there? ? What's your expectations for Curtis Mead in Chicago?
Curtis Mead, I'm not too worried about ballpark for his power. It's more about strikeout rate and contact for me and Curtis Mead. So I'm not too worried about the ballpark. If he is going to get the playing time, then I'm absolutely interested. Unfortunately, It is the White Sox. That does temper things just a little bit. But when it comes to power hitters, it really depends where he hits in the lineup. They're slightly below average for home runs over 3-year rolling average. But overall runs scored further down the list. So yeah, I get it. But it is really tough for me to even thinking White Sox, right? Because they have had a fairly consistent lineup throughout this season, and with guys they still have. So who are we kicking out if we put Mead in here?
Yeah, I mean,
Right?
playing third base very sparingly has been Josh Rojas, splitting time with, oh geez, just looking at this lineup, Colson Montgomery, who's been kind of killing it since being
Right.
called up as well, splitting time between third base and short the left side of the infield. So Curtis Mead's original position was third base. Obviously he can play the other corner as well, but Miguel Vargas has been holding that down basically ever since Andrew Vaughn was sent down. So those are the only two places Curtis Mead is going to be playing besides DH.
Right. And maybe it is DH. Does a team like the White Sox need two catchers in their lineup on a daily basis? So I tend to believe he somehow works his way in here. It's going to be interesting to see who loses out on playing time. My first inclination is, why do Kyle Teal and Edgar Cuero both need to play every single day? But they're both young guys, and they may want to see both these guys hitting every day. This one's tough for me. And you actually threw me for a loop on the Curtis Mead because I forgot I told you before we started recording, as much as I have been looking at all of these lineups and as many times as I have went through the entire trade list, I still keep forgetting about that things have happened. And yeah, you threw me for a loop right there with Curtis Mead.
Yeah, well, I mean, just going down this is why I'm utilizing the transaction list here. Ryan Noda was activated from the 10-day IL and then optioned to the minors. Shane Smith is the one who took over Adrian Hauser's spot in the rotation because he was activated from the IL. So we don't even need to speculate on what kind of changes are going to be made to that lineup for that rotation as well. So, just something fun. They did something. Congratulations, Mike Carter. You have something to look at. All right, moving through we're going to stay in the American League East because that's just how the alphabet works. We'll go to Cleveland. Sorry, American League Central, obviously. We'll go to Cleveland. And just to recap some of the moves that they made as I'm going down, not a whole lot either. Ultimately, the biggest one doesn't really impact us at all when it comes to Cleveland's rotation or lineup is that they sent Shane Bieber to the Toronto Blue Jays. And that's about it. They did trade Paul Sewald, but he was already on the IL. Shane Bieber already on the IL. And so not a whole lot changed. Apparently, the asking price for Stephen Kwan was too high for anybody to pay up for. So is there anything else that you noticed that you want to talk about with the Cleveland Guardians?
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with trades, but it occurred after we recorded last weekend, and that is what's the official wording? The leaguers when we've seen this as the gambling's become more and more prevalent and legal in more places, we're just going to continue to see more of it. Emmanuel Clase not available for the Cleveland Guardians for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I just saw a tweet that both his and Luis L. Ortiz's lockers have been completely cleared out as well. So that's not a temporary thing. The last thing I saw was Clase was going to be out at least until the end of August, but it sure looks like it's going to be longer than that. Cade Smith seems to be the heir apparent, though he did not perform all that well. Quote official closer all year, been good, but got blown up a little bit in his last outing. Hunter Gaddis had some run, at least in our fantasy circles. Was it 2 years ago as a possible closer when Class A looked like he might be hurt. So he's kind of next in line as well. So those are my top two. Kate Smith still seems to be the obvious choice, if you will, as long as he doesn't continue to hit a bunch of bumps in the road. Cleveland, though, in that same kind of bubble as the Baltimores and the Athletics. Obviously, Class A was a step above, and he'll find his way to get those saves. And he was a very valuable piece to get that category. How much are you trusting the likes of Kate Smith and or Hunter Gaddis to be that rock?
I think it's definitely one of the two. I think it's more likely to be Kate Smith. This is, though, however, the situation where I'll bet a couple of dollars on Hunter Gaddis, hoping he slips through, and he does end up being the guy. I got him really inexpensively. Cade Smith, where he is available, and I do just want to check something really quick here, because I know he's 95% rostered in main events, right? So he's going to have more availability in 12-team leagues. But he's going to be expensive. He is going to be expected to be the guy on a team that is expected to compete for a postseason spot. So they expect him to have save opportunities. And he's been lights out for a season and a half. You did mention he's had a couple of hiccups along the way, but overall numbers just not as good this season as it was as a rookie last year. And I don't think many of us expected him to be that good. But I think Cade Smith will be very expensive this weekend. Definitely worth having a bid in on. Because, as I mentioned, some leagues people are out of money. Some leagues you never know how many people are going to remember to put in bids this week at this time of year. But then throw a couple dollars on Hunter Gaddis just in case, because he'll be much less expensive if he does end up taking the job.
Yeah. Cleveland, at least historically, at least in the last like 5 to 6 years, has pressure on them. So I know that Rick Ram in our Discord was a little concerned. We'll see if that irons itself out throughout the last 2 months, or if he can step up to the plate and get where he needs to be for our fantasy rosters. All right, moving on then. Again, we get to stay in the American League Central. Head to Detroit. Detroit making some waves, or more waves than the last two teams we just talked about. So there's more to talk about here. As I remind myself of everything that they did. Still in Cleveland, move over to Detroit. Cool. So, of course, I mentioned earlier, they added to their rotation with the likes of Charlie Morton and who else did they bring in? Charlie Morton. And then bringing in Paul Sewald as off the IL, and they will, once he's ready, he'll enter their bullpen. Kyle Finnegan and from Washington entering the conversation for the back end of their rotation as well. And those are kind of like the bigger moves that they made overall. A lot of other moves for some kind of like pieces that are just like depth pieces and what have you. But it did the kind of the rippling effect here with Charlie Morton coming into the starting rotation is they announced that Trey Melton would go into the bullpen. What kind of a role do you expect out of Melton in the bullpen rather than in the rotation, which minus his debut has been looking quite promising?
Yeah, that's intriguing to me. And it throws a bigger wrench in this, right? Because we already were wondering, Tommy Conley had kind of pitched his way out of this. We were seeing more and more Will Vest. Then they bring in a guy like Kyle Finnegan, who does nothing except convert his save opportunities, no matter what the rest of his line looks like. He gets the save. Who's gonna be the guy? Will Vest or Kyle Finnegan? Now, if you're not going to put Troy Melton in your rotation, I would say he's a candidate in that spot as well. So it throws another wrench. I think we still see Troy Melton being used in more multiple inning outings, so he is available to come back into the rotation at some point. But for now, they will run with Scooble. Charlie Morton, I love this ballpark for him, the way he has come around.
Sure.
The let's say past couple of months after a really rough first couple of months of this season. So Charlie Morton there, Chris Paddock. Now, Chris Paddock is a guy I'm really intrigued to see, right? Because this is a guy that I want to see what another team does. Chris Paddock wasn't nearly as good in Minnesota as he was in San Diego. There was injury concerns. There was possibility of tipping pitches. We saw stories on at times, and now he gets another coaching staff, right? So I am really intrigued to see what we see from Chris Paddock. He had regressed quite a bit after that great run he had for a solid 2 months of the season, from like the beginning of May through towards the end of June. Chris Paddock was really good, and he had fallen back off again. So I'm really intrigued to see what he does here. It's AJ Hinch, already familiar with Melton and Vest, so maybe Will Vest is still his 1A for the ninth inning. I wouldn't be dropping Kyle Finnegan yet, even though you're not getting nearly the saves you had been getting from him. Holding on for at least a week to see when the usage looks like with him. But I'm really intrigued on what may happen with new coaching and a pretty nice ballpark to pitch in for Chris Paddock.
Yeah, thank you for calling out the Chris Paddock one. That happened, of course, a couple of days prior to the deadline. So I didn't quite get that low in my list here. Not a whole lot of moves made to impact their lineup, though. Beyond some injuries, Kerry Carpenter coming back from injury, activated from the IL, and then Parker Meadows pretty much the very next day getting placed on the IL, or officially placed on the IL. Reese Olson also hitting the IL for the Tigers a couple days ago as well. So that seems to be kind of a 1-for-1 between Kerry Carpenter and Parker Meadows. Parker Meadows not really performing the way I think we expected anyway, and it's probably because he was hurt. Any other observations worth making on the Detroit Tigers lineup?
Not really. We know we're going to see Matt Vierling versus lefties, and once in a while versus righties. That just means we now know that Matt Vierling is taking Kerry Carpenter's spot in the lineup versus lefties. I think it's that simple.
Sure. All right. We'll move out of no, we won't. We'll go to the AL West here with the Houston Astros. We kind of alluded to some of the moves that they made earlier as well. I think the biggest one here, which I thought was just amusing, well, first they traded for Ramon Urias because they needed help at third base with Isaac Paredes being
so
out.
Excited for this long,
yeah.
Adam.
And then an hour later, the rumors started swirling throughout the course of the day. And actually the day prior to that they were going to bring back Carlos Correa, and Carlos Correa rumored to have been telling his teammates or his old teammates, "Hey, yeah, I'd love to come back." And lo and behold, they do, toward the very end of the trade deadline, it does become official. Carlos Correa is now Houston Astro once again, and is going to be playing third base for them. So Ramon Urias becomes more of a utility infield start. And you would expect Carlos Correa, as long as he's healthy, is the everyday third baseman for here on out. Again, well, not once again, but now for for the Houston Astros. Couple other moves, cleared waivers, and he ended up going. But they also sent down, and Jeremy Pena did come back right into there, Kevin. I mean, Carlos.
Excited. Not excited because of the Isaac Paredes news, but due to the news that Houston is preparing to not have him back this season, I was super excited when Ramon, he would just take over at third base. Mauricio Dubon is going to play second. Altuve can DH. Pena's back at short. Jesus Sanchez, they needed an outfielder anyway, and there's the room for Correa.
Oh,
just blows my Ramon Urias, I think. He's going to play very little unless Dubon starts losing playing time, and they love Dubon. You know, he's always been there for him. He's been this guy getting in the lineup. So, as far as fantasy goes and what we can be actionable on, you know, Pena was rostered. Nobody was dropping him, even though he was out about 3 weeks. Correa rostered. Even Jesus Sanchez is rostered in most spots. But I think we consider them, they're all upgrades, right? Getting Jesus Sanchez into this lineup, hitting third. Carlos Correa coming over from Minnesota, who was up and down and mostly down throughout the season. It's upgrades for players we already had. Not a lot we can do. And in some 15-team leagues, he wasn't playing every day in Baltimore, but I in a couple of really deep leagues, I was using Ramon Urias, and he's a drop now for me.
Yeah. Fair enough. And then, you know, as you mentioned, Mauricio Dubon is moving to second base, obviously with the Bryce Matthews getting sent down. So you kind of alluded like, hey, this is how it's going to work out for Ramon Urias. It's still working out that way for Dubon.
Yes.
And so yeah, that part's right. And so continuing to play every day there for that. So if you were holding on to Dubon and riding him through his recent hot streak, you can continue to do so. All right, we'll move on from there. Like I said, they didn't really do a whole lot to impact their rotation or their bullpen. Obviously, Josh Hader holding down the front there as well. Moving on then to your Kansas City Royals. They made some interesting moves. Unfortunately, it led to our boy MJ Melendez being optioned back down to the minors. And man, we didn't even talk about him. But as quickly as he came, he is now gone. Rich Hill has cleared waivers, and he is now a free agent once again. Good for him for just getting back into the game with over 14 years of service time now being recorded for Rich Hill, pitching 2 starts for your Royals at the age 45. But they did acquire a new outfielder, Mike Yastrzemski from San Francisco. And they did bring in a new starting pitcher, Bailey Falter, going to the Royals. You assume that he locks right into that rotation as well. But those are really the 2 main additions. They did trade away Freddie Fermin to the Padres as well. So you lose the catcher, which was an interesting move. Obviously with Salvi being as good as he's been recently. And I'll ask you, like, why do you think Fermin was expendable?
I don't know as much as that he was expendable. I think the Royals might have been surprised at what they got back. 2 guys that have pitched in the starting rotation for San Diego this season. And all of a sudden, Royals knew coming into 2025 that they were extremely lucky when it came to health with the starting rotation in 2024. They knew that it was very highly unlikely that that would repeat. And of course, now they have injuries in the starting rotation and needed depth. Some of what they were planning on didn't quite work out. Kyle Wright had a couple of setbacks. They were counting on him by now. So they actually added 3 starters here. And I'm not so sure we do know for sure that it will be Ryan Berger and Bailey Falter, because they did also receive from the Padres Stephen Kolek. So he's a possibility as well. But it will definitely be 2 of those 3 guys. Most people that the way Justin has this at Roster Resources, the way I'm seeing it, and most of the Royals writings that I see, is that we're expecting it to be Berger and Falter in the rotation. Yes. But we do have guys coming back. Michael Lorenzen should be back by the end of August, and we're hoping for Cole Reagans around then or not long after. The Royals did, extend Seth Lugo earlier in the week. That was when I knew, okay, the Royals are gonna they're not gonna do anything huge, but they're not selling. Seth Lugo was their biggest trade chip, and I thought there was a possibility they trade Seth Lugo for an outfield bat and still try to keep everybody else. That wasn't a move that they could possibly improve their team, even with losing who has been their best pitcher in the rotation this season. So yes, I think we will see Berger and Falter in the rotation for a few weeks until we get Michael Lorenzen and Cole Reagans back. The Mike Yastrzemski edition is I it, you know Mike Yastrzemski has been a very streaky player for San Francisco. I think there will be a lot of upset Royals fans when he's not going well. But when he's at the hot end of his streaks, he's awesome and fans love him. And he hit a home run in his first at bat as a Kansas City Royal. That's going to buy him a few days.
Oh, absolutely. All right. Well,
Randall Grichuk as well. We know he's still versus righties. He will play versus righties and some lefties. So Randall Grichuk, it would be viable definitely in 15-team leagues as well. The Royals needed these outfielders, so they're going to play.
And it seems like that's every time I see a move that the Royals have made this year, it's been for an outfielder, either calling up outfielders or trading for outfielders. It seems like they've been just continuously moving their outfield around with different bodies and kind of hoping something will stick. All right, we'll move on then back to the AL West with the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. In a non-shocking manner, the Angels were very quiet as well at the deadline, not making a whole lot of moves that are going to impact their major league roster. They did bring in Oswald Peraza, a utility infielder from the Yankees, and sent Kevin Newman on assignment, or designated him for assignment. We'll see what the result of that is shortly. But that's really the only real moves that were made that should impact from the deadline itself. They did bring in a couple of relievers as they made some other trades with Luis Garcia and Andrew Chafin coming over from Washington as well. So I'm not seeing a whole lot of change that's really impactful. Jack Kohanowitz was called back up from the minors a couple days prior to the deadline. Anything else of note that you're seeing out of Anaheim that is worth monitoring for your FAAB bids?
No, the biggest thing of note was that Kenley Jansen stayed put.
Yes, and that's it. Jansen, we'll get to Atlanta too. Iglesias, like some of the guys that were not traded, that was,
helped a lot of us that were worried in some spots, right?
Yep. Sometimes that's the biggest move that is not made. The one that impacts you the most.
Yes.
All right. We are far enough along into the American League, and I think it's safe to take our second break. All right. Well, let's get right back into it, Kevin. We're into Minnesota. We talked about how Carlos Correa left their lineup, but they made other moves as well, mostly selling off pieces, so opening up opportunities for others. We talked about, Chris Paddock being sent off a couple days prior, but they also, sent away just about everybody in their bullpen that wasn't nailed down.
But Adam, did you bite on? Did you think Joe Ryan was a Boston Red Sox for a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, you had to think it was just from the rumors, but now the aftermath of the rumors are basically like they did nothing. They were not even close. That's what all the beat writers are saying in Boston now. It's like, no, we're learning that they did absolutely nothing. So that didn't happen. I saw a great tweet. Again, I feel bad. I have these memories of seeing things without actually recording them and who said them. But somebody made a note that now the Minnesota Twins, there are only 2 players on the Twins that have guaranteed contracts in 2026. Byron Buxton and Pablo Lopez. That's it. Everybody else is either a free agent or still in arbitration. And that's crazy.
That is crazy. Which means all the free agents are getting cut by the end of August, right?
Oh yeah. That's probably true. Other guys that did leave Minnesota will go with their bullpen first. Griffin Jacks, Juan Duran, John Duran, Luis Farland, kind of the big names that we knew, if one left, it would be the next person down would be the closer. Then we knew Jacks would leave. Then it might be Varland to be the closer. They even sent veterans Danny Colomb out. Brock Stewart is out. And so before we get into anything further, who's left? Like, this is the same question we had with Baltimore. Who's left in the Minnesota bullpen that's going to be closing games?
Yeah. So roster resource has Cole Sands. That makes some sense. Although he's been what's that?
He was just the opener the other day.
Right. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. Not necessarily of him being the opener, but that he has been available to them throughout the season. He hasn't done a lot, but multiple times he's went more than an inning. So I don't know that they want to not use him in that role in order to save him for the 9th inning. That's my only hang up. Otherwise, I would agree that it's probably Cole Sands. And this is a situation we probably want to try to figure out. Now, especially with everybody that Minnesota just got rid of. Minnesota wasn't playing very well anyway.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned earlier, kind of up and down throughout the season, but more downs than ups. That's why they made these moves. So it's not a situation that we have to figure out, but I think it's one. I think Minnesota wins enough games. We want to try to figure this situation out. Cole Sands, I think, makes a lot of sense. And then I'm looking at guys, nearly 36-year-old Michael Tonkin. Because when you look at this, the bullpen that they do have, Adam, you go to this way more often than I do. But based on what Minnesota just did, are they going to give anybody any arbitration fuel here? Right. I don't think so. I think they give the old guys the safes. So once you get past Cole Sands, who probably has the most talent for the role, we probably see somebody like Erasmo Ramirez closing out games for Minnesota. I really think so. They're not going to give anybody any arbitration fuel here.
Yeah, that's probably fair as well. Uh, Not a whole. I wouldn't say a whole lot. I am losing Chris Paddock out of the rotation. Makes obviously provides an opening. They did acquire Taj Bradley from Tampa Bay in the Griffin Jacks trade. So he's an option to. He was sent down by Tampa Bay at the before the trade, so he should still technically be in AAA for Minnesota, but he could be called up at any point. What's your expectation for who's going to fill in the Chris Paddock move, at least in the short term?
I think I remember looking at this earlier. I had this figured out. Oh, because they get Ober back and they brought in Taj Bradley. I think they're fine. The Ober we're going to see on Saturday. Joe Ryan, Simeon Woods, Richardson, and Zebby Matthews still up, and then with Taj Bradley back, I think that's their 5.
Yeah, I mean, Simeon Woods is still up. Festa on the IL, so not an option to get called up. So, assuming that they do just call up Taj Bradley as a 1-to-1 in a day or two, that makes sense. They did lose Carlos Correa in their lineup, as we mentioned earlier. And they did call back up Edouard Julian as well. So there's an infielder to kind of fill in that gap. But they also traded for James Outman from the Dodgers, and then immediately optioned him to the minors as well. So Harrison Bader did leave their outfielder, go to the Phillies. Ty France was traded over to the Blue Jays. And Willie Castro traded to the Cubs. So a couple of veterans presence out of Minnesota in those guaranteed contracts and all that. What kind of impact are you seeing on the Twins lineup?
Yeah, I think we're going to see Cody Clemens versus righties. He probably will still sit versus lefties if they can find someone to play first base when when they're facing a lefty. So I think Cody Clemens just slides over there. And you mentioned Edouard Julien playing second base on Friday. I expect we see him in that spot for the foreseeable future. That I hope something finally works out for Edouard Julien. I've been in on him, at least intrigued, at least on my watch list every time he's come up. Just been disappointed. Not giving up, but he's not worth adding yet. He's worth keeping an eye on. We will see Brooks Lee, I think, with not having so many days off. He's going to be in there. I was really upset that James Outman went to the minor leagues right away. I have gladiator teams and draft and hold teams that were very happy to think that James Outman was going to get consistent playing time now. And so far, he's not. But the guy I am interested in, and I think will in NFBC main event leagues, I think he'll be fairly expensive. Alan Rodin has been really good in the Toronto system so far this season. I think they're going to give him the run for this final 2 months of the season and see what they have in him. And he's been really good at the minor league level so far.
Yeah, Alan Rodin coming over from Toronto in all those trades. The other addition they made to their outfield, instead of just putting James Outman in there, is they called back up Austin Martin, who had originally also come over from Toronto a couple years ago at this point. But Austin Martin and Alan Rodin today in the lineup 1-2, top of the order.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to see. Again, you trade for Outman and then send them to minors, and instead call up Austin Martin and put him right at the top of your lineup. So something to look out there. Yeah, I'm expecting Brooks Lee, especially as good as he's been lately, to be pretty much playing every day at shortstop. As you have mentioned in the past, shortstop's not the position that you typically see a platoon in as well. But with Carlos Correa not in the picture anymore, somebody's got to play that position. And Royce Lewis's body is probably not built to do it anymore. Brooks Lee, I'm expecting to see him in the lineup pretty much every day. Moving on then to the New York Yankees, who made plenty of moves themselves. All of the closers that whether they were on the market or not. You talked if we thought Duvall would be on the move from San Francisco. I flat out said no. I did not think that was a player that was going to be moved. And lo and behold, he is now a New York Yankee, along with the likes of Jake Bird and David Bednar entering the fray with Devin Williams for closing opportunities for the Yankees. I mean, David Bednar gave up a home run in his first run today against who they're playing, Miami. David Bednar came out to try to clean up Jake Bird's mess. Not a position he's been used to doing. So I'm just trying to give a grain of salt to the situation here. He's used to coming in at the start of an inning, bases are empty. I'm just going to close out this inning. I need 3 outs. Instead, he came in with, ducks on the pond, and lo and behold, gave up a home run and then gave up a couple of hits after that before finally getting the last 2 outs of the inning. Then came back out for the next inning and went 1-2-3. And so I think David Bednar is going to be just fine. The question is, will he continue to take save opportunities from Devin Williams, who had his own hiccup earlier in the week as well, right before the trade deadline? And how much will Duvall play a role? Is this have the potential to being a committee on a very good team, or is Devin Williams still kind of the guy?
I think Aaron Boone has that luxury now, right? He will have options. I don't think it's gonna become a Dodgers situation. What we anticipate the Dodgers situation can be at times. I don't think it goes that far. I think it's typically Devin Williams, but any of Bednar, Duvall, or Luke Weaver, even Tim Hill or Jonathan Loaizaga last night. We'll get a save here and there for this team, but I think it's mostly Devin Williams.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I'm not dropping Bednar anywhere I have him at this point until I start seeing some consistent. He's coming out in the 7th inning. He's coming out in the 8th inning to set up Williams back to back to back to back. And even
any of these guys, any guys like Bednar, like Duvall, I would not drop this first week. I wouldn't drop any of them this first week. Mm-hmm. You don't have to pick up anybody that we usually bring up in the ratios category. This week, they're already on your roster. You don't have to go get them, right? That at least for a week to see what the usage is going to be, because they're going to be valuable to you in that situation anyway.
Mm-hmm. They didn't really do anything in the rotation minus releasing Marcus Stroman the day after the trade deadline earlier today. So Marcus Stroman sent packing, and that's ultimately in preparation for Luis Heel being returned from the IL. He's expected to be returning from the IL over the weekend. But the lineup did get a little bit of a mix-up. And we mentioned as well Peraza going to the Angels, their utility infielder. They replaced him with Jose Caballero from the Rays, who they were playing in that game, as I mentioned earlier. They also traded Everson Pereira in that trade as well. So overall, I mean, I read a couple things on Jose Caballero and less playing time on the Yankees. From a fantasy perspective, this is it's like you aren't rostering him for the playing time. You're rostering him for one thing and one thing only. You're rostering him for two things: the roster flexibility, because he's available pretty much everywhere, every position besides first base and catcher, and you just want the American League leader in stolen bases on your roster. He's actually, I believe he's tied for the Major League record or lead with O'Neal Cruz. So he's still he's got a stolen base today as a pinch runner, as a pinch runner or pinch hitter. Pretty sure he's a pinch runner. So he's still getting you what you want out of that, and you can plug him into any position if you have a need, especially in those NFBC formats where you just need to be able to shift somebody in there, and you've got a whole bunch of guys on the IL. You kind of see this situation any differently than the way I just kind of outlined it?
No, I agree. Because we had already seen a hit to Jose Caballero's playing time, right? So if you still thought he was useful this past week, I agree. He's going to be useful in the same way going forward. I anticipate to be the case. We'll get a little more clarification on that over the next few days. My biggest worry for what transpired just prior to the trade deadline for the Yankees is with Aaron Judge on the IL. I was really comfortable with Trent Grisham's playing time. But then bringing in Austin Slater probably takes those at bats versus lefties away, and Austin Slater will take those from Trent Grisham. That's the biggest thing that I see here.
Yeah, fair enough. I got to learn to scroll a little bit further past the trade deadline to make sure I get
Yeah, some
all of
things
these
happened
transactions.
Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday as well, Adam.
Right? Things happen. All right, let's go over to Seattle, who did do some stuff before the trade deadline. Not a whole lot, but they did. They optioned Jackson Kowar to the minors. They brought in Caleb Ferguson into their bullpen. So not a whole lot right before, but right during, they made the big move to bring in a big bat, Eugenio Suarez from Arizona, as they kind of shore up either, that third base / DH position in their lineup. Are we, obviously Suarez, knows what he's doing in Seattle. Are we worried at all? Again, this is my power question for Curtis Mee going to Chicago, or at least for the White Sox. Suarez going into the ballpark in Seattle. Are you worried at all about that sapping his belt? Obviously, there are players that can hit home runs in Seattle. Cal Raleigh is doing what he can to hold up the total home runs that the Seattle Mariners can hit. But are we worried at all about that ballpark change for Suarez?
Well, so the cool thing here in Seattle is the home run factor isn't really about the ball, right? No, it's not as much the batter's eye as there are these windows that are open and the sun comes through at the time of day that Seattle's playing games. And I think Eugenio Suarez performed just fine in Seattle previously. So I think he'll be fine there again. Yes, their home run ballpark factor on Savant, taking away the rolling 3 years, which I know that can get us in trouble. We do the 3 years for a reason. There's a lot of noise in ballpark factors, but it does correlate, right? If you take away the 3-year rolling, there's still bottom third of the league for right-handed hitters hitting home runs at 14% below league average. So yeah, that it is a concern, but the fact that he has played there before and performed fine, and the fact I just lost my train of thought, Adam. I had another reason. I had another reason I like Eugenio Suarez.
I mean, he's just
his power. He doesn't hit.
Yeah,
he doesn't hit home runs into the first or second row. That was exactly it. Thank you. So I think Suarez will be just fine. They brought Josh Naylor in too. He's another one that came in earlier in the week, Adam.
I did see that one. I just didn't say his name. Yeah.
Brought Josh Naylor in too. This one, I think, and I know he hasn't performed as well this year so far as he has in the past, but right now, Seattle has 4 of their Fab 5 of their starting pitching rotation healthy, and the 5th one was thrown tonight. And the first 3 innings when we started recording, he had been lights out so far tonight, Bryce Miller. So they're about to have their entire Best rotation in baseball coming into the season, all back and healthy. We'll see what they do. They now have Matt Brash backing up Andres Munoz at the back end of that bullpen. And then they added Josh Naylor and Eugenio Suarez to the lineup. This is the team I am now scared to death of. And as a fan of a team that's behind them fighting for a wild card spot, I do not expect the Seattle spot to be available.
Mm-hmm.
I expect Seattle to move up the ranks, not out of a playoff spot. So this is one for you and me as Red Sox and Royals fans looking for that spot. I think one of them's gone.
Right. Lock that down. Well, I would say that either one of our teams did not do what Seattle did properly at the deadline. And so you got to do what you got to do, and they didn't do it. All right, moving on to Tampa. They made plenty of moves as expected. Every single trade deadline, buying, selling, whatever, like kind of playing the fence. Obviously, we talked about Curtis Mead being sent away for over to the White Sox. They did bring in Everson Pereira from the Yankees in the Jose Caballero trade. Taj Bradley went over to Minnesota. Griffin in the Griffin Jacks trade, so they brought in Griffin Jacks. Zach Littell ended up trading to the Reds in a 3-team trade, which we'll get to in pieces. And then Adrian Hauser, as we mentioned earlier, entering their rotation consideration. After the deadline, they did activate Ha-Seong Kim once again from the IL. And then Matt Tice was designated for assignment. And Jonathan Aranda was placed on the 10-day IL. So a lot of moving parts in both their lineup, rotation, and bullpen. I guess starting at the bottom in the bullpen, I guess going back a day to Brandon Lowe was returned from the IL as well, playing second base for the Rays. And going even further back, so I don't make this mistake again, Nick Fortes was brought over from Miami in a trade, while Danny Jansen, their other catcher, was traded away to the Brewers. And so making quite a bit of moves throughout the week leading up to the deadline as well. In the bullpen, Kevin, we expected Griffin Jacks to be somebody who either would stay in Minnesota and take over the closer position. There was possibility that Griffin Jacks would be the one moving to Philadelphia and taking over that closer position. He moves instead to Tampa. Does he have consideration to take over that closer position, as good as he's been?
I don't think he takes it over, but yeah, this is probably the latest in the year that we've still seen Pete Fairbanks healthy,
right,
as the closer for Tampa. So Griffin Jacks, even 49% rostered in 12-team leagues. That probably goes up with people. He's universally rostered in 15s. Now in 12s, he'll be close as well because of the injury history of the guy he's behind now.
Sure.
Is what I see going on there in Tampa.
Yeah, Adrian Hauser locks right into the number 5 spot. But I think most notably with the exits of Littell and Taj Bradley, it solidifies Joe Boyle back in the rotation. He was already in the rotation, but now he gets a little bit more clarity. Probably finishes off the season unless he completely blows up in that rotation for the rest of the season. I will even go out as far as to say Adrian Hauser is not guaranteed to be on this roster by the end of the season as well. So, I mean, he probably will be, but if all of a sudden you were to see Adrian Hauser was DFA'd at the end of August, are you going to be shocked if Tampa Bay is completely, out of the running at that point? Probably not. Lineup consideration. Obviously Jose Caballero out, but they bring in actually they won't really bring in anybody to replace him as a infielder. So does this just clearly defined roles of the players that they already had, with Han-Sung Kim coming back from the IL, and Johnny DeLuca just coming back from the IL in the outfield. Chandler Simpson was beat up a little bit, but he is not going on the IL. Overall observations from the Tampa Bay lineup.
Yeah, I believe that so far we've seen Johnny DeLuca play a game or two versus righties, all the games versus lefties. We'll continue to see that. I think Johnny DeLuca can play himself into more playing time, and hopefully that does not come at the expense of Chandler Simpson. I don't think it will. They are a platoon at the moment. Chandler Simpson and Johnny DeLuca, but the like Thursday when Johnny DeLuca play versus a righty, it did not affect Chandler Simpson. That's what I expect going forward. It was Jake Mangum that lost out on the playing time that game. I kind of feel like the more Johnny DeLuca plays, the less Jake Mangum plays. But Chandler Simpson will play versus righties. Other than that, you mentioned it. Brandon Lowe and Hae-Sung Kim both coming back. Brandon Lau, will be in the lineup every day. Hae-Sung Kim, it depends on how often we're going to see Taylor Walls. We're not interested in Taylor Walls for our fantasy rosters. We are interested in Hae-Sung Kim, so this will be something to monitor. How much playing time Hae-Sung Kim gets versus Taylor Walls.
Yeah, ultimately, how much playing time can he handle, Kim? That is,
right,
without getting beat up a little bit.
Great point.
So we'll see how long that lasts. But there's one less mouth to feed in the middle infield with Caballero kind of like lingering. So, or not lingering any further. All right, moving on then to finish out the American League. We got two more teams. Texas making kind of a big move into the rotation, bringing in Merrill Kelly from Arizona. They also add to their bullpen, but not in the way I think we expected. They did not bring in that veteran or that obvious closer answer. So it does seem as though Robert Garcia is still the closer in Texas. So if you took a spec ad there when he took over that role, continue to ride that, roll that dice as long as he's been performing and he's been good. So keep rolling with that, because I don't think Danny Colom and Phil Maton are taking that role from him, at least not tomorrow. But they were brought in to strengthen the bullpen as well. Prior to that, they did get back Jock Peterson from the IL, and Sam Haggerty as well. But ultimately, those were like the major additions from the trade deadline. It did lead to, as I mentioned earlier, Kumar Rocker being optioned to the minors along with Jacob Latz. So there were some casualties in these moves that are made. Merrill Kelly's rostered everywhere. If you roster him, you're just happy. You're probably happy he's on a probably more winning ball club with some winning opportunities, more opportunities for wins here. Do you share my sentiment that Robert Garcia is probably still the closer, or do you think the veteran like Phil Maton can come in and kind of take over, especially as the righty?
I think it's Robert Garcia's to lose. So I agree with you there. The rotation pretty set. They made their decision. Jack Leiter stays, Kumar Rocker down, with the addition of Merrill Kelly. Something intriguing, depending on the severity of Josh Young's injury. He's out for a second straight game on Friday, and they're calling it calf soreness. This could be intriguing because I think the fallout would be we see Josh Smith moving across the diamond and Rowdy Tellez versus righties as we have the last two games. So that's worth keeping an eye on if you need power. If this does turn into something, even an IL stint for Josh Young, Rowdy Tellez probably the beneficiary here.
Yep. All right, we'll finish out the American League. with the Toronto Blue Jays. They do make a couple moves. We've talked about most of them already in their rotation or their future rotation. They're bringing in Shane Bieber, who's still rehabbing. He's set to rehab in Buffalo, their AAA spot, over the weekend as well. Not sure how many rehab starts Toronto will want him to do before activating him, but he will be a nice addition to their playoff push and probable playoff appearance as well. They also brought in, prior to the deadline, Sir Anthony Dominguez that we mentioned earlier. That allowed them to designate Chad Green for assignment. And this was funny too. Will Wagner was put on the restricted list during the ceremony, the Hall of Fame ceremony, right? So he could go to the ceremony and watch his dad get enshrined. And then just a couple of days later, he was traded to the Padres. And so he had a whirlwind of a roster list. As I mentioned earlier as well, they added to the bullpen with Luis Varland as well. Luis Varland his quote came back recently. He's pretty excited to be there. Toronto's excited to have him. They'll be using him in various means, but probably more just high leverage bullpen situations. Perhaps Luis Varland gets stretched out into his starter workload next year, but for moving forward, I expect him to stay in the bullpen. They did lose George Springer due to concussion protocol. He's on the 7-day IL there, but they did get back Dalton Varsho from his IL stint as well today on Friday. So with all of that in mind, Kevin, I don't think that's really impacting the bullpen, any of this, as far as closer situation goes. Shane Bieber, we don't really have to make a move for, because you can't in most scenarios. He hasn't made his MLB debut, 2025 debut yet. Ty France, any interest there, or is this more of a, obviously a bench piece?
That's yet to be seen. They need Ty France for a little while, but we don't know how long they will need them. It's interesting to me. Tyler Heineman is getting a majority of the starts at catcher, while Alejandro Kirk is out. Joey Loperfido has been on fire over the past couple of weeks, and his playing time is probably safe until George Springer returns, at least until then. And he may play himself into staying in the lineup, at least versus righties, more times than not going forward. So Joey Loperfido is definitely someone to take a look at. He's in the lineup hitting second here on Friday. He led off in their last game on Wednesday. Prior to that, he'd been in the bottom third of the lineup since being recalled back at the beginning of July. So Loperfido hitting near the top of the lineup is very intriguing, and it's due to performance. They've moved him up. This is a reward for all of his multi-hit games recently. At least it appears that way to me. I would think that's what this has a lot to do with. So he is somebody to definitely take a look at. And then, as you mentioned, Dalton Varsho right back in the lineup in center field on Friday night. But hitting a little lower in the order than we might expect, but he's been out a long while. And when he moves back to the top of the lineup, which I expect to happen at some point, we might see Loperfido drop back down a ways. But yeah, I am very intrigued about Joey Loperfido. Somebody we tried to use in a couple of spots last season. We got a little excited when he got the call. Didn't work out very well. But now in Toronto, if he's going to hit in the top third of the lineup, I'm definitely interested.
There you go. And of course, to note, if that change sticks, at least in the near future for Luperfino, he'll be batting toward the top of the lineup in Colorado to start next week. So Toronto facing off in Denver for the first 3 games of next week's schedule. So got to get that info in there somehow with this weird format that we're doing today as well. All right, that finishes out the American League. We will hit up the National League right after this break. All right. You know what? No, we're going to go in reverse order, reverse alphabetical order for the National League.
Gotcha.
And we'll go with Washington, W at the end of the alphabet for all those at home keeping track. We talked about some moves that they made as far as shipping off some, especially some pitchers. Kyle Finnegan leaving their bullpen a little bit more open for somebody else to take over that closer position. They also ship out Michael Soroka to the Cubs, so there's an opening in their rotation as well. Other Alex Call was also traded over to the Dodgers in a smaller move, and because of these moves and a couple others, Andrew Chafin as well and Luis Garcia leaving their bullpens as well. They were able to bring back Robert Hassel III, Ryan Lotus, Orlando Ribalta were all recalled from the minors as well. So with all this in mind, I mean, really the biggest thing is that this is a low win percentage team with a obvious opening at the back end of their bullpen. But do you see an obvious choice to get the bulk / all of the save opportunities for the Nationals?
I don't. And you know why, Adam? That if they're going to follow, not if they're not going to fuel anybody's arbitration case, their closer's not on the roster. Right. They have one guy in their bullpen with a full year of service time, and he's only got one. So it's none of these guys. I really think that is the case. I think they do end up bringing somebody in for that reason. But right now, I think it's probably Jose Ferrer as the as roster resource has. Oh, half of this bullpen was in AAA 3 days ago.
Right.
so there's not a lot going on there. And I think as far as the rotation goes, it's Shinosuke Agasawara, who we have seen in the rotation throughout the year. I think we continue to see him along with Mitchell Parker, Jake Irvin, Brad Lord, who we've seen up and down, but back in the rotation now. And of course, Mackenzie Gore. So I really don't see a whole lot there. But then as far as the lineup, Robert Hassel recalled, not in the lineup on Friday. I feel like we're going to see him at least. I mean, Paul DeJong has played 4 of the last 5 games for Washington. We know who Paul DeJong is. I think Washington would be better served to figure out who Robert Hassel III is. Right? So I expect that to change, but not overnight. That would be a thing that we see gradually change over time, and that's about it. Jose Tena was recalled. It's been almost a week, and he hasn't been in a lineup yet.
Right.
So the offensive lineup hasn't really changed for Washington through all of this, other than I do think with the recall of Robert Hassel III that they got to give him some run.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree there. It really, I mean, they faced off against a lefty starter to start the game today, so expect him to be in the lineup as soon as they face a right-handed starter. All right, moving on then, going up the ladder to St. Louis. Obviously, talked about how they sent Steven Matz to my Red Sox and Phil Maton to the Rangers. But they also sent away their closer, Ryan Helsley, to the Mets, which obviously we'll get to a little bit later. So they had a pretty obvious opening at the back end of their their bullpen as well. And after the trade deadline, they did put Nolan Arenado on the 10-day IL. And they brought back Nolan Gorman from his IL stint as the 1-for-1 move there as well. Anything, I mean, closer in St. Louis, and then no, we didn't have a whole lot of interest in Nolan Gorman before his injury because he just wasn't doing anything. But now that it's kind of a, obvious, he has an obvious hole to fill with Norton Arenado being on the IL. Is there any interest level increase there?
Not really for me. I mean, there are situations where it'd be worth a shot. Yeah, if you're in a deep league and you lost Arenado, for example, maybe Nolan Gorman is the best available that you perceive in your league. But that would be the situation where I would have interest there. Other than that, gosh, I want to say Jojo Romero. We've seen him be really good at times for quite a long time over the past 2-3 seasons. So I'm not certain that's the way they'll go. It's the way I hope they go. It's the way I think they'll go. Jojo Romero is who I would add in this bullpen, hoping for saves. And then, yeah, not much interest in Nolan Gorman other than really deep leagues where I need a third baseman.
Are you not concerned at all the fact that he's the only lefty in that bullpen?
I'm always concerned
Sure.
with that, but
He's just been very good. He's just been so good.
Yeah, he's been that good, and for a long time, he's been the guy that when Helsley has missed time with injury, he's
Yes.
been the guy they've turned to. So that's probably why it's in my head. Roster Resource has 3 guys listed as the closer, and yes, they have Jojo Romero on top, but in my mind, Jojo Romero is who they've went to in the past when Helsley was down.
Always interesting too. Not that they're making a whole lot of moves up and down at the top of their bullpen anymore. He's the only one though without any options left either. So he's definitely not going anywhere.
And Uncle Ted, great point. No way they give saves to pre-arb. We've talked about that multiple times so far this episode. They don't have anybody that isn't pre-arb in that bullpen right now. So maybe they bring somebody in, but until they do, and I've brought that point up in other situations, saying I think they'll bring somebody in that for that reason. So Uncle Ted, you could be 100% correct in this situation as well. But until they do, they don't have a choice but to play someone that's pre-arb in the 9th inning.
All right, we'll move on to another team that lost their closer because they chose to trade them away, by the way, not because of injury or anything like that. But the San Francisco Giants did trade away Camilo Doval and Mike Yastrzemski in the outfield, obviously to your Royals. We talked about that as well. So there's a couple of openings made there. They did not make any kind of major moves to their rotation that I think a couple people might have been expecting. There were some rumors that Justin Verlander was on the block and for interested contenders. Obviously, he did not get moved either. For various reasons, I'm sure, most of it having to do with production, and just not trusting what he can do at this point, even though he has looked much better in the last 2 starts. But overall, those were really the only major moves that they made at or near the deadline. Tyler Rogers also left their bullpen as well. So not an option to take over that role. They did bring in some replacements, Jose Buto into their bullpen, Drew Gilbert from the Mets. So they did get some younger pieces in there, Blade Tidwell as well from the Mets, but these are minor league pieces that aren't going to make an impact for them at the very moment. Overall, Randy Rodriguez is the obvious choice for the new closer in San Francisco. It's already been announced that he'll be the closer. Shocking, I know. He's been so good. He's probably rostered in a bunch of places already just because he fits the bill that we talk about with ratios and strikeouts from a bullpen position. And if there was going to be a move, he was going to be the obvious move to get into that role. Does the lack of Mike Yastrzemski in their outfield open up any time for anybody else?
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be Grant McCray as a 1-for-1 and platoon and all, just like Mike Yastrzemski did. That's what it looks like to me. I think he slides right in that spot, and we continue to see Luis Matos versus lefties in that spot. Grant McCray has stolen a lot of bases in the minor leagues and shown us a little bit of power to go along with it. in his little bit of major league time so far in his career. He hasn't been able to get on base enough to use that speed, but that would be the hope. He would be a speed play here first and foremost. That moderate power would help back it up if he can hit for a little bit of batting average to not be too much of a drain for us in that category.
All right, now we get to the meme. This is like AJ Preller has become the meme of the trade deadline because the meme is he has never met a trade deadline he couldn't master. And so all the trades come through San Diego, whether they happen on the deadline or right before the deadline. We talked about, Stephen Kolek going, being traded over to your Royals. But they all, they did a whole bunch of other moves on the day of course, the biggest one we talked about at the very start of the show, bringing in Mason Miller from the Athletics, parting ways with their top prospects, Leo DeVries, and a couple other pieces as well. Mason Miller slotting right into the end or close to the end of the bullpen. And that's the question mark everybody's asking themselves. Does Mason Miller take closing duties away from Suarez? And the answer is maybe. It seems as though there's a lot of rumors going around that, Suarez is still going to be the primary closer. Miller is going to be used in a variety of ways. I was the first one to say in the Pitcherless Discord that arbitration's going to play. They're already paying Suarez to do this job, and he's been doing it just fine. At one point, he was leading the majors in saves for the majority of this season, and he's in the, he's still in like the top 3 in overall saves still currently. So I am of the opinion that Mason Miller is not taking over the closer role in San Diego, in that there is a possibility that long term San Diego is going to stretch out Mason Miller as a starter. I don't think that happens until at early as 2026. What's your overall feeling on Mason Miller's role with his new team?
I agree 100%. And even though I highly doubt, even if they were going to try to, transition to Mason Miller, they wouldn't do it the very first game after the trade deadline. However, on Friday, Mason Miller pitched the 8th inning with a 3-run lead for San Diego. So they are saving Suarez for the 9th on Friday.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on that as we go. There's still plenty of San Diego to talk about, so it might even happen before we're done talking
Right.
about the team. They add to their rotation in that same trade by adding JP Sears as well. They bring in pieces to their infield and outfield with Ramon Laureano and Ryan O'Hearn coming over from Baltimore. Nestor Cortez comes over from Milwaukee to also at some point enter the fray into their rotation as well. Martin Maldonado was designated for assignment in order to make room for some of these guys. Tyler Wade was designated for assignment to make room. And then Ron Marcio was optioned to the minors as well, again, to make room for these players and a couple other ones. Will Wagner, I mentioned earlier, did get traded to San Diego, and then they automatically optioned him down to the minors as well. So with all that, I mean, JP Sears, Nestor Cortez, got to assume they go right into the rotation, obviously once Cortez is ready to go. And that kind of solidifies their rotation, at least through the regular season, and gives them a little bit more depth, obviously, to make a playoff run. JP Sears, are you all of a sudden interested in him now that he's on a winning ball club, not pitching in West Sacramento half of the time? Or is JP Sears still kind of just like this pitcher that doesn't really do much for you?
I've been streaming JP Sears away from West Sacramento, and it's worked out pretty well most of the time. So I'm definitely more interested now with that better lineup behind him. Yes. And this 2-step coming up this week at Arizona, at home versus Boston. Those aren't the greatest matchups Also, neither one of them scares me too much. So this is one of those, if you're not throwing him for that two-step, he shouldn't be on your roster, in my opinion.
Yeah. Right.
And I would add him for this two-step, especially definitely in 15-team leagues, I would.
Fair enough. And that'll
93% rostered in 15s, only around 35% in 12s.
going to expect Randy Vasquez to exit the rotation once Nestor Cortez is ready to go as well. So just keep an eye on that situation, and we'll talk about that when it actually happens. Of course, Stephen Kolek out of the rotation as well, as he's been traded. Freddie Fermin, how does this lineup kind of iron out as they add Freddie Fermin, Ryan O'Hearn, Ramon Laureano into the fray for this San Diego lineup?
Yeah, I would expect. I know Elias Diaz has been performed fairly well for them, and we've seen him hit in spurts throughout his career, especially when he was at home at Coors Field when he was with Colorado. But he's been good in spurts. I think Freddie Fermin not being in the lineup on Friday evening, first game with the team after the trade, I think it's multifold. One, they're facing a lefty. Two, catchers, it's a little tricky. It's not just throwing you in the lineup; it's getting to know the pitching staff and is definitely the starting pitcher on Friday night. I expect Freddie Fermin to get at least 60% of the starts going forward for San Diego. Freddie Fermin would be a starter on many teams in Major League Baseball. One of the ones he is not a starter on is a team that has Salvador Perez as the starting catcher. So I think Fermin slides right in and it gets at least 60% of the starts.
Fair. Yeah, so keeping an eye on that box score to see if Suarez gets in. They are up 3 runs, so the save opportunity is still ready for them to take over. Yeah, I mean, we expected, at least we kept hearing all the rumors that the one thing that San Diego was trying to do was add bats, or at least add a bat. Instead, they add 3 to kind of shuffle things around. Laureano being in there to start in left field today. Ryan O'Hearn, of course, against the lefty, not in the lineup. Nobody's surprised in that one. That's what his role is in Baltimore. So I don't expect that to change here in San Diego as well. Kind of just to go backwards a little bit. We talked about the Yankees taking over all the closers and how Bednar came in and didn't do that right.
Yeah.
The rest of the bullpen didn't do that great either. The new acquisitions. So as the game went on, ultimately Duvall came in and he ended up taking the loss, allowing 3 runs and an earned run himself, only getting 1 out. Not only the loss, but the blown save on top of that. Technically, Bednar also got a blown save. It was just a little bit earlier in the game. But the I guess the interesting thing is that Williams was not used in that end game scenario at all. They just kind of threw out the new guys and to kind of see what they got. I guess the Yankees are going to do that and be like, hey, let's see what you got in pinstripes and throw you into the fire. All right, moving on then to the next team. We are going to Pittsburgh. Another team who did not make as many moves as I expected them to make, especially revolving around their rotation. They ended up keeping Andrew Heaney. They kept Keller. They pretty much kept everybody with the exception of Bailey Falter, who we talked about earlier, went to your Royals. They did trade Taylor Rogers, who they had just gotten recently as well, to the Cubs. And they did, of course, as we mentioned, trade away their closer, excuse me, David Bednar. And then right before the trade deadline, they weren't really super active, but they did trade Brian Hayes, which was a little bit of a surprise, I think, to the Reds. The Reds just love trading for infielders in general. So he's playing third base now for Cincinnati. And Caleb Ferguson and Taylor Rogers, as I mentioned. Taylor Rogers actually came over to the Reds, and then obviously just like a day later went sent over to the Cubs. So Dennis Santana, the obvious closer in waiting in Pittsburgh. I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time on him unless there's something else you're seeing that I'm not. But the absence of Brian Hayes, is that opening up the door to anybody else to kind of take over everyday role at third base for the Pirates?
Oh, that's a great question. Who's going to be the third baseman for the Pirates
And do we care?
on Friday? Yeah, this is what we would expect. I think. I think we would expect to see Jared Triolo in there after being recalled, and get a little bit of run here and see what we can do. He's, you know, at one time was a fairly highly touted prospect. Now he's 27 years old, but I think we're going to see some run from Triolo here.
Yeah, I don't see why not. We, kept seeing him in and out. He had a really good spring training from what I remember as well.
Yep.
And so to see him with an opportunity kind of lock down a position, which he hasn't really had this season. He's been more of a utility guy. It'll be interesting to see. All right. Well, I thought there'd be more to talk about with Pittsburgh, but there wasn't. But there's plenty to talk about with the next team. Go ahead.
Do you agree with roster resource? Is Oviedo going to get this two-step this week for Pittsburgh?
With in the
rotation. Yeah,
I mean, I don't see why not. I'm of the
looked
opinion
pretty good in the minors, so I'm intrigued. That's why I want to know. You think he gets this two-step?
Everybody's clamoring for Bubba Chandler to come up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Bubba Chandler is coming up anytime soon. I think not only is, and I've said this before, like he's got to get some of his control down and walk a little bit less guys to kind of show that. And I think that they're just going to play time manipulation and get as many innings out of him as they can at the major league level. So yeah, I can totally see that happening. Having somebody else come up instead and just piss everybody off.
Yeah, I might throw $1 in Oviedo in some deep leagues where I need a 6th or 7th starter this week.
That's the thing. It's not Oviedo's not. He's already made his debut. He's not new to the major leagues, so it's like
he's available.
He would also be the next man up, if you will. So it wouldn't be out of character, I guess, for the Pirates to call him up instead of the big name. All right, Philadelphia, staying in the state of Pennsylvania. We've got some decent moves we talked about earlier that they did bring in their new closer. Now, before we get into anybody else, my question to you is, can Jhoan Duran be the guy that comes in to close games for Philadelphia from outside the organization and actually do it? Like instead of just completely crumbling under the pressure, because it seems as though very good relievers go to the 9th inning of Philadelphia to die. Like we've seen so many good relievers, they've signed them to extensions. They go into the 9th inning and all of a sudden they just can't perform past maybe a week or two. And so Duran obviously is a cut above pretty much everybody that they've had in the 9th inning for the last couple of years. But I mean, he's obviously the closer in Philadelphia. Are you worried at all, or am I just making stuff up?
No, I am. Exactly what you just said. I expect Duran to perform well in Philadelphia, but we have thought the same about others. So on the rosters where I have Duran, I am worried. Yes.
Right,
shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. It's not the type of thing I should be worried about. Everything that we look at that we think is predictable tells us he'll be just fine. I shouldn't be worried, but I am, to your point.
And somebody, the guy that they traded for Duran, we didn't even talk. We forgot to even mention in Minnesota section, Mick Abel should be an option for the Twins to fill that. We were talking about like, hey, this is their rotation, but Mick Abel should be an option for the Twins as well to fill in any one of those 5 spots if they want to continue to like move Simon Woods Richardson around as he's gone up and down a couple times as well. So Mick Abel being the other piece of the puzzle on that Jhoan Duran trade. They also bring in an outfield help with
I thought I saw him listed in their rotation somewhere. Maybe that's when Joe Ryan had been traded. I
Oh,
don't
right.
know.
You know what? Honestly, the Phillies didn't do nearly as much as I just alluded to, but they did bring in Harrison Bader for outfield help as well, and they acquired Matt Manning from the Tigers as well for I guess kind of replacing Mick Abel in a way as that sixth or seventh man option to call up if and when healthy. Harrison Bader, what kind of role are you expecting out of him in Philadelphia?
We will at least see him versus lefties. I mean, it looks another former Minnesota Twin could use a platoon partner in the outfield, Max Kepler. Uh, but we'll at least see Bader versus lefties. I think we'll see him a little more than that, but that's when it becomes tricky. Brandon Marsh, much better versus righties. Kepler himself, better versus righties. Nick Castellanos, they like in the lineup every day. But I think Bader will get more than just short side platoon. But that's all we can expect is the short side platoon.
Sure. And then, of course, he does replace Johan Rojas, who was optioned to the minors to make room for Bader as well. Moving on to the Mets, who, again, a team we expect to make a lot of moves, especially for big name or big money players. They have an owner who doesn't mind spending money. They did not make kind of like the major moves that I kind of expected. They did bring in a closer, though not presumably not to be their closer, but a former closer, Ryan Helsley, obviously from St. Louis, we talked about already. And they were able to bring in Tyler Rogers from the Giants. So adding to their bullpen depth in the top of their game as well. And they didn't really make a whole lot of other moves on deadline day. Both of those moves came on the 30th, but they did lose. They did choose to move Luis Angel Acuna down to the minors to make room for some of these other moves that they made. I correct myself. Of course, they made that move to make room for Cedric Mullins, who they acquired from Baltimore. Right, Edwin Diaz is obviously still the closer in New York. Is this a situation though where you are safely dropping or considering dropping Ryan Helsley if the timing is just the right timing for you?
Would if I have to, but he does fall in that category where I talked about earlier. He is one of the guys where I would hold him at least a
Another
week
week. Sure.
to ensure what the usage appears it's going to be, because he will be useful even without saves. So he falls into that category. But the rest of this, the offense is kind of crazy. I think the Angel Acuna demotion is they're just more impressed with Ronnie Mauricio recently. I think it's that simple. He's getting that playing time when Acuna would. I'm intrigued to see Mullins. Will we see him every day or just large side platoon? I'm kind of leaning large side platoon, especially with them still having both Marte and Tyrone Taylor on the roster. But that will be interesting to see going forward.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't start today against the lefty, so at least that's the initial reaction seems to match up with your suggestion. All right, well, moving off from the Mets, then we will hit up the Milwaukee Brewers, but we're gonna first take another quick break. All right, on to the Milwaukee Brewers, who at one point or another, and I have to double check the standings, but they had the best record in baseball. If you haven't noticed, they're pretty good, and they tried to make themselves a little bit better by adding, not a whole lot.
Not a lot.
Not a lot. Danny Jansen, as we mentioned earlier, came over from the Rays. They ended up optioning Craig Yoho from their bullpen as they acquire Brian Hud. No, they designated him for assignment. Jordan Montgomery, who's obviously hurt for a long time. They sent Nestor Cortez packing to the Padres. They outrighted Eric Haas in conjunction, I would assume, with Danny Jansen entering the catcher situation for them. They did acquire Shelby Miller from the Diamondbacks to kind of fill a little piece of their bullpen. But not a whole lot here to really consider for fantasy purposes, Kevin, unless I'm missing something major.
Yeah, not a lot. You're correct. The thing I am intrigued by is as far as the rotation goes, I just think it's like Jose Quintana and Quinn Priester have been pretty good. Brandon Woodruff has been as good or better than we could have hoped coming back from this injury, and Jacob Mizorowski looks lights out. So then we've been scoring double-digit runs every game and have the best record in baseball. We don't need to do anything. That was Milwaukee's trade deadline.
That was their trade deadline. Just be good.
Good luck with how well these guys came back from injury. Some of them, especially Brandon Woodruff, right?
Yeah. They
finally
they did bring in Brandon Lockridge from Sandy in that Nestor Cortez trade, and he did start today in his first game as a Brewer, leading off for in right field for the Brewers. Whether they are starting against the lefty, that could be more of a platoon situation with Sal Frelick, who's been leading off pretty much every other day while he's been injury free. So I mean, I don't think that I'm not expecting that to stick, but it could be a situation worth monitoring if that's going to be their roles. All right, we'll move on then from Milwaukee and get to Miami. And finally, I get to mention this very interesting fact that you put on here is the fact that we have two teams that have 8 games next week, Miami and Atlanta, where they obviously play each other to get to that 8 games as well. But they play 4 games Monday through Thursday and another 4 games Friday through Saturday. So just an interesting situation. We don't usually see multiple teams having 8 games. A lot of times where you have a doubleheader, some team happens to have 6 games, it gives them 7, and maybe one of those teams gets 8 games. But interesting that it worked out this way for both Atlanta and Miami. But they, again, also a team that didn't sell as much, I think, as a lot of people expected. Sandy Alcantara is still on the roster. But Nick Fortes was moved to Tampa Bay, as I mentioned earlier, freeing up that catcher position. And then Jesus Sanchez was traded to the Astros. Ryan Gusto was brought in from the Astros in that trade and then optioned to the minors pretty much immediately. But that's really also about it. Again, unless I'm missing something, Kevin. Miami kind of staying quiet, even though they're definitely in a position to sell. Do you expect any changes the next week that you'll be interested in?
Yeah, not a lot really, and it was surprising. I think almost everybody expected Sandy Alcantara to be moved,
Mm-hmm.
and he stuck around. I think, and the entire rotation, all of these guys have been blown up at times this season. They've all actually looked really good at times either, so they're all intriguing depending on matchups. So I love that we're still seeing that. On the offensive side, it's the biggest thing for me, and I'm going to circle back to Tampa as well because we forgot to bring this up. Something that we were talking about pre-recording. We've talked for a few weeks now about running on Miami, and when we get to the speed category, we look for the opponents of the Miami Marlins and try to find guys available for them. With Atlanta having 5 games versus Miami over the weekend, I'm definitely looking for that this coming week. Now, you brought up Nick Fortes. he was getting right at 1/3 of the starts at catcher for Miami over the past month or so. As you brought up when we were talking earlier, lots of times the running game, the running's done on the pitcher, not the catcher. There's team philosophy. There's certain teams pay more attention to try shutting other teams down in the running game. So what I'm getting at, as far as Miami, Nick Fortes was only catching a third of the games for the team that is the worst in baseball at stopping teams from stealing bases. So I don't think this affects that. I'm still targeting Miami. As far as Nick Fortes going to Tampa, we talked last week about Houston being closer to as bad as Miami than they were as being as good as team number 28. That's no longer the case. Tampa was gaining on Houston all this week. Tampa has been almost as bad as Houston on the season at stopping the run now. And now Nick Fortes is probably catching half of their games.
Right.
So
not helping the situation.
So Tampa we're targeting now in the running game as well, but I'm not getting away from targeting Miami in the running game. I wanted to make sure we brought that up. We forgot about it when we were talking Tampa.
Well, worth mentioning then, Tampa playing all their games away from George Steinbrenner Field, playing 3 games against the Angels in Anaheim and 3 games against Seattle in Seattle as well. So if you're looking for players on those teams to steal some runs, steal some bases, continue to do so. Great. So yeah,
And then I am really intrigued by Jacob Marcy in Miami, who was recalled for Friday's game, hopping in there. This is a guy we've seen steal 40 plus, 50 plus bases in the minors and does have some moderate power as well. We did not, I don't think many people expected to see Marcy at the major league level this season, but this might be an extended look. We might see him for a couple of months, and I am definitely intrigued. I'm already putting him in my waterfall bids, depending on what we see over these 3 games, however much playing time he gets and what he can do. He might be moving up those lists.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, good to talk about speed options against the team we're talking about and on the team we're talking about. So
if everybody's running on them, they think it's easy. They're going to take off too,
right?
Well,
they can do it. I can do it too. All right, moving over to the West Coast and talking about the Dodgers. We've got they were active as one would expect, both right before and during the trade deadline. One acquisition that they made that had nothing to do with the trade, Blake Trinan was activated from the 60-day IL, so they add to their bullpen in that manner without having to make a trade. But they also add a couple other pieces throughout the week. Brock Stewart being the main one in the bullpen, coming over from Minnesota. Not one that I am expecting to be in the mix for saves, but with the Dodgers, you kind of never know. Brock Stewart could get a random save, not somebody I'm going to go chasing for to get saves. But Brock Stewart is somebody we've brought up in a ratios category at one point or another as well. So just another name to add to the list in that regard. They do lose Dustin May from their bullpen / rotation. Talked about that going over to the Red Sox, and of course James Outman going over to the Twins in the Brock Stewart trade. Not a whole lot more though. A lot of moves being made, but mostly it almost makes it look like the Dodgers were selling because they brought in so many minor leaguers and prospects in these deals coming over in the Dustin May trade. In trading. Brock Stewart being pretty much the only major leaguer of consequence. They did bring over Alex Call, major leaguer from the Nationals, presumably to kind of take over James Outman's position in their lineup or on their bench. And they did lose Hee-Seong Kim to the IL as well. So the two Kims in the league switching spots on IL with Ha-Seong Kim obviously coming off of the IL for Tampa Bay. They did lose Kirby Yates though today, being placed on the IL. They do expect to see Blake Snell. He is slated to start on Saturday. He'll come off his 60-day IL, being out most of this season with his shoulder issue. So a lot there, Kevin, I guess, but is that a lot of nothing burger, or like what kind of impact are all these moves making as far as how you look at opportunities to pick up Dodgers?
It's not any easier this week than it is any week figuring out what the Dodgers are doing.
Do it.
My biggest goal with the Dodgers, one, I think it does appear that Alex Freeland is going to get some run here. And Uncle Ted brought him up earlier in the chat as a corner, if anybody needed one. So we got him. I do think Alex Call will play versus lefties in the outfield. And then here's the biggest thing for me. As a pitcher, Shohei Ohtani still hasn't gone over 3 innings. So at least another outing or two. I doubt he goes 5. I want to know who's
Who's
following
after him?
Shohei Ohtani.
Sure.
With Dustin May gone, we have at least 2 guys that I know for certain have done it this season. That's Ben Kasparius, who we all like, and whether we think he's going to close now, whether we think he's going to be in the rotation, whether we think he's following Shohei, everybody loves Ben Kasparius. But we've also seen Justin Robleski, in that role following Shohei Ohtani. I think I doubt we know for sure on Sunday night. Because Shohei is not slated to start until Wednesday. But I would try to figure this out by Sunday, with those being the leading candidates thus far. And so far, depending on what we see in usage over the weekend, Justin Robleski being the lefty. St. Louis, typically 2 of the first 3 lefties that they face in a game, or 2 of the first 3 hitters at top of the lineup are lefties. If they expect Shohei to get through the lineup a second time, I kind of feel like that's going to be their goal here. He's pitched 3 innings 3 times. The number of batters he's faced has went up in each of those games. So if they're looking at a couple times through the rotation, that gets us to 4 innings, 4 1/3. Then it would be the lefty they would want. I know that I am really reaching here, but I really want to figure out who's following Shohei Ohtani on Wednesday. My best guess is it's Robleski or Kasparius, and right now I lean Robleski.
I bet Sheehan also an option to kind of take over the
I think they need him
role.
to start. Yeah.
I know. I'm not saying he's not going to start, but he's also done it as well.
He's done it. Yeah. Exactly. But
so
that's what I'm looking at with Dodgers right now for the most part. The lineup, it's same as always, trying to figure out these guys. Michael Conforto continues to show signs, but he hasn't done much more than show signs that he might break out of this season-long slump. Multiple times this year, he started to look like, okay, maybe. And we've seen some more of that over the past week or so. So I still roster him in a couple spots, and I'm not dropping him yet. He's not in my lineup, but I'm holding out hope for Michael Conforto in a couple spots.
All right, fair enough. All right, we'll stay in the American League West, National League West. Wow, it's been a long show. And go to Colorado, who unsurprisingly very quiet. We never expect Colorado to do anything, even though they always should. They made their noise last week when they finally traded Ryan McMahon to the Yankees. But since then, they've been just basically doing a lot of up and down with their minor league players. They did trade relief pitcher Tyler Kinley to Atlanta, bringing in Austin Smith. So just swapping relievers here. And then the Yankees sent them over Ben Shields, 26-year-old starting pitcher, option in the Jake Bird, leaving their bullpen and heading over to the Yankees bullpen. So I mean, do I even have to ask anything of interest here, Kevin?
No, I think the only thing for me, because we would expect a team like Colorado this time of year, they're going to bring up all the kids and we're going to see what they can do, right? No, what we're seeing in Colorado is more solidified playing time for Orlando Arcia and Kyle Farmer. But for our draft and hold teams, that's probably good because they did get drafted in draft and holds. And so we have gained players there. And they're the guys to keep an eye on, pay attention to matchups. And they're not guys we want in our lineups all the time, but in a pinch, we know they're going to be there and available.
Man, I didn't realize Colorado's lineup is so righty heavy. It's like looking at Houston's lineup, but on the National League side.
They got Mickey Moniak.
They have
And he's
Mookie
playing
Moniak.
versus a lefty on Friday.
They only have two left. I mean, I guess Toglia is a switch hitter as well, but either way. All right. Well, we got 4 more teams left, Kevin. Cincinnati did make a couple of moves, I think, worth at least thinking about. We talked about them bringing in Kevin Hayes from Pittsburgh as their maybe new everyday third baseman or just third baseman in general. I mean, with all the infielders that they have, especially even at third base, do you expect Kevin Hayes to stay at third base or to be used in any kind of utility manner for the Reds?
No, I expect him to pretty much play third base. And that is due to the fact that they found a spot for Noelve Marte right away. They just moved him to right field.
There you go.
They sent Jake Fraley from right field to left field. And it looks like a done deal to me.
Mm-hmm. They do send down Reese Hines in the mix of all of this, as they also bring in Zach Littell from the Rays. We mentioned him leaving earlier, and then Miguel Andujar came over from the Athletics right into the fray as well. TJ Friedel was put on the restricted list today, but I would expect him back soon enough. So Zach Littell, and you can't. I mean, I understand that the ballpark that Tampa Bay has been pitching in has not been pleasant for pitchers in general. It's definitely a hitter's ballpark, but you're going to Cincinnati now. Like, is this just something that completely puts Littell off your radar, or are there still matchups in which you're going to be interested in streaming Littell where you can?
There probably will still be some matchups when I'm interested. However, while some pitchers, it doesn't bother me as much when they're pitching in Great American Small Park because it's not a great overall ballpark as far as runs scored. It's just about the home runs because it's small park. So Zach Littell is not a guy I'm interested in pitching half of his games in that ballpark. The guy that has had home run issues throughout his career and definitely since 2021 is the most recent year where and even at that time it was more than a home run per game on average, but that's the only time he's even been close to only one home run per game.
Miguel Andujar, we mentioned, coming over from Oakland, not in the lineup to start, though he had been producing decently well in his short return back to the A's. Do you expect him to play any kind of role beyond a bench piece?
Maybe. I'm not confident in that yet, but it's worth keeping an eye on because he's one of those guys who, like you said, he's been performing pretty well recently, and he's always out there available for us when we need him, it seems like. So definitely worth keeping an eye on. Yes.
All right. We'll keep an eye on him, but probably, not throwing any bids on him this week.
Right.
All right. We're home stretch here, Kevin. Chicago Cubs going to finish off.
Cubs didn't need to do anything.
They didn't need, because they were one of those teams that are just doing too good, kind of like the Brewers.
And solidified their rotation. You mentioned it earlier, bringing in Soroka. I think that's the absolutely fine move. I was surprised they did not bring in more back-end bullpen help other than Andrew Kittredge. They did make that. Well, they got Taylor Rogers as well. Yep.
And they,
But
in
neither of these
addition, by
guys do I think
subtraction.
are taking over the ninth inning role. I think this solidifies Palencia there.
Sure.
But then on the offensive side, as we have stated many times throughout this season, there is not a more set lineup in baseball. Since last Saturday, there Ian Happ was injured one day, and Reese McGuire relieved Carson Kelly at catcher one day. That's it in the last week. Their lineup is set.
Well, they did do a piece of to their bullpen where they did some addition by subtraction by designating for assignment Ryan Presley. So they did make that kind of a move.
I missed that actually.
Yeah. And so that did happen after all the dust was settled and all the trades are like, you know what? All right, Ryan, you're good.
It's been so long since he's been in the ninth inning. I forgot all about him.
You have to assume somebody rolls the dice and brings him in as a bullpen, as a depth piece in their bullpen. I'll be very curious to see who does roll said dice. You know what? Ryan Presley would be the perfect guy for some of those pre-arb or those arbitration filled bullpen,
100%.
like Washington and what have
Yep.
you. Even St. Louis, like whoever doesn't want to spend the money on those saves. West Sacramento, the Athletics as well, another option there.
That's a great call. And in fact, I expect that to happen. That's a great call.
Two more teams left. Atlanta, the other team that has the 8 games next week, 5 against Miami. Just keep that on your radar as well when you're looking to stream some hitters. They did lose Ronald Acuna Jr. to the IL with what appeared to either be a calf or an Achilles injury. I didn't see the final word on that, Kevin. Did you?
The Achilles is clean. Now they're calling it a calf strain.
Yeah,
the MRA was clean on the Achilles, is what I saw.
He'll still be out for a good 2 or 3
longer
weeks.
than the minimum.
Yeah,
yes.
So they did lose him there. They did bring back Jared Kelenic. It seemed to be that was like that 1-to-1 for Acuna coming back, being sent down. They traded for Carlos Carrasco a couple days ago from the Yankees, and he's already made a start for them as well. And then and they what I guess the moves that they made or the moves that they didn't make, right? We talked about their entire bullpen is still intact.
The whole bullpen pulling. Yeah. All these guys they could have got something for.
Mm-hmm. They
kept them all.
They did send down Dane Dunning earlier today to the minors, brought in Austin Cox. So just a switcheroo in that bullpen, but they didn't actually lose anybody in the bullpen. Are you Iglesias? This is the final year of his contract, right? He doesn't have any options or anything like that. That's what made it the most surprising for Atlanta with all of it that they've gone through this year, not contending mostly because of injuries and just not getting the production out of players. Yes, Uncle Ted, Ozzie Albies is heating up and doing better. Michael Harris is also doing better as well, heating up quite a bit. But it's probably going to be too little too late. Jared Kelenic coming in to fill in for Ronald Acuna. Is that of interest at all? Like, are we still interested in players that are on Atlanta, even though they're kind of just trying to tread water until the season ends? Like, Atlanta is kind of like the Baltimore of the National League for me. It's like the team that obviously everybody expected to be in playoff contention and in heading into the playoffs at this point in the season and just not.
Yeah. So the intriguing thing to me is they called up Jared Kelenic, as you said, when Ronald Acuna Jr. went on the IL. Jared Kelenic has not played, and Eli White has started 3 consecutive games in right field, and he is 0% rostered, and he only has 7 stolen bases on the season in 205 plate appearances, but 2 of them came in the last week. This is our guy for stolen bases with 5 games
Miami.
versus Miami this week, Adam. It is Eli White, my favorite speed guy for the week.
There you go. Good call out there. I'm glad I could set that up for you. They did bring in earlier in the week Eric Fede as well. After being DFA'd from St. Louis,
Yeah, him
pretty
and
sure I
Carrasco are
called
both. They're
this.
going to eat innings. They're
Yeah.
not going to burn. We hear about don't waste the bullets in the minors. We also don't want the extra high intensity in the majors when it doesn't count for our young pitchers coming up.
All right, let's close it out with the final A team of the National League, Arizona, the Arizona Diamondbacks, of course, as they were definitely sellers. We talked about Merrick Kelly going over to Texas, Suarez going over to Seattle, Shelby Miller going over to Milwaukee, and then, of course, Jordan Montgomery going along with him. Not really making an impact there, obviously, with Montgomery being out for so long. They do kind of fill in the gaps a little bit with mostly minor league pieces and prospects and what have you. So that does leave some openings throughout. I think one of the more surprising ones for me was Tristan English being sent down to the minors, not being able to fill in that first base spot anymore until Pavin Smith is ready. It's not like that was a 1-for-1. Pavin Smith has not been activated. They did get Jalen Beeks back into their bullpen from his IL stint as well. So with Shelby Miller not in consideration, Jalen Beeks back in the mix. What's your what is your take on Kevin Ginkel? Is he just obvious closer? Does he hold on to that job? He's been obviously this guy that we've been seeing as the possible closer of the future for Arizona for a long time, for a couple of years now. And he's not been very good. Do you put any stock into Jalen Beeks kind of being in the mix here? And again, do we care at this point?
I kind of do care because I think Arizona is still going to win some ball games, a few, right? They're not going to the postseason. They're not going to go out. They're going to probably play under 500 ball the rest of the season, but I think they probably win 40% or more of their remaining games. So I am intrigued here. I agree. I think everybody's first inclination is with the guys that are left. It's Ginkel. I agree with you that Beeks has a shot here. I also think Kendall Graveman, that he's done this before and he's back in this bullpen. So I could see him getting some ninth inning opportunities as well. So, but I do think it's worth keeping an eye on and trying to get a better read on it if we can, because I think Arizona will win a few games down the stretch here.
Not surprising to see Merrill Kelly get traded. Are you surprised to not see Zach Gallen get traded?
Yes, leads me to believe that a combination of they still valued him higher than other teams do now, or other teams didn't have any interest at all, because I really thought he'd be on the move.
Yeah. And then we got to talk a little bit about their lineup. Like I mentioned earlier, Tristan English, who had been filling in at first base, being sent down. Tyler Locklear came over from Seattle in the Suarez trade. And so with the lack of Suarez at third base and DH, and Tyler Locklear obviously kind of coming in and filling in first base, any other kind of moving parts that you're seeing in the Arizona lineup worth keeping an eye on?
No, I'm intrigued by Locklear, though. A guy we have seen at the major league level in the past, but not yet this season. He's a guy that we expect to have decent power, and then he's a great fielder. So that may keep him in the lineup for the final 2 months of this season. And at the minor league level, his prospect reports tell us that power is his calling card, but at the minor league level, he's stolen as many bases as he's hitting home runs. He was going to be well over 2020 at AAA this season, already being at 19 home runs, 18 stolen bases in 434 plate appearances. So this could be a nice power speed combo at a corner infield spot going forward for us.
Mm-hmm. And then Blaze Alexander being moved over to third base after Suarez was hit in the hand. That was a scary moment in Detroit. Everybody kind of expected him to be traded to Detroit during the series that they were playing each other in. And then, of course, he gets hit. So Blaze Alexander already moved into that position, started again at third base today with Suarez off the roster completely. Is this kind of solidify playing time for Blaze Alexander? Do we, if Jordan Lawler is going to actually return this season, does he kind of move in? Is there any opening for him to take over? I know he's hurt, but, he could still come back. Any expectations on the left side of the infield for Arizona with the opening made by Suarez?
No, I think they're going to run with it with Alexander for a while versus righties. Adrian Del Castillo, I think, is the DH now that everybody else is healthy, right? We've seen Corbin Carroll have to DH some, Ketel Marte have to DH some. Geraldo Perdomo is DHing on Friday. That's because Adrian Del Castillo is not going to play versus lefties. So he's getting a break from fielding, and I think that's where we will see these guys get breaks. Marte, Carroll, Gurriel, like on Friday, is when they face a lefty, one of them will DH, and versus righties, that's going to be Del Castillo most days. So, yep, lineup looks fairly set right now to me.
Yeah. Well, that closes it out, Kevin. We didn't quite hit the only 2.5 hour mark. We didn't get close to the 3 hour mark. That's both disappointing and relieving at the same time. Any other kind of closing thoughts on kind of the moves you make due to the moves that the real teams make in your fantasy leagues? You mentioned it earlier. We're at a point in the season where you might have a league where you have too much money. And do you use this time to spend all that money, or are there better moves to make later on next month, like throughout the month of August? Overall, any kind of tips of the trade that you can give that can, kind of put everybody at ease after a very hectic trade deadline?
Yeah, it's been crazy. I never want to spend money just to spend money, just to get rid of it, so to speak. I mean, there's still 2 months left. But I would, if there are players available in my league that can help me, in my mind, substantially more than the other guys available at the same position, I'm bumping my bids a little bit right now if I've been losing out on my bigger bids, so I have more money than most players in my league. Yep.
Fair enough. All right. Well, I think after all that and everything else, that's going to do it for episode 225.
That was a blast, Adam.
It was a blast. Thank you all for sticking around as long as you have, whether you're watching it live or listening to us on Sunday morning.
There was something really early in the show in the comments. And I think we addressed or answered a lot of what Uncle Ted brought up. I thought it was, maybe it was just a comment. Oh, no, here it is. Durf Boy was asking if Luke Keeschel gets the call up with everything the Twins did. And they did barely have a roster. It seems to me, yeah, they barely have a roster. So if they were calling Keeschel back up again, they would be doing that right now, and they haven't. So I'm expecting that remember, guys can come up and down and back up and still right. The original call up date, you aren't accumulating service time from that date, regardless of what happens. You get sent down, that clock stops, right? I think that's what's going on with Keyshaw now. So they want him rookie eligible next season. It'll be even later before the end of the season we see him because of the at-bats he got earlier. I wanted to bring that up because that was a great question really early in the show, actually. I'm glad I remembered right here.
The last report I read, and I'm reading right now from Brian Hall on Twitter, said that Keyshaw and Ober both continuing their rehab stints with AAA, with the Saints. So he's continuing.
Yeah, I don't think we see Keyshaw right away after he's rehab, though.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I think they will.
Hey, congratulations! You finished your rehab and stay where you are.
Yep. I think that's what happens because now they are in the position where it's in their best interest to manipulate his service time.
Yeah, fair enough. Hate to see it, but you do see it and you have to be prepared for it.
Right.
All right. So, I will say, John Gambandora over on the Twitter talking about the Arizona did say that Jordan Lawler was close and that he expects him to get the majority of the reps at third base when he is healthy and called back up to Arizona. So, just a situation to continue to monitor in that situation. So this, again, I say this every show. I get all my news from the Discord in the Pitcher List Discord in the news channel. So if you're a member of that channel, you already know where I'm getting all my news. And if you're not a member, you should probably go do that. All right. Or you can just continue to listen to us every week. I'm happy to continue to repeat those things. But that is going to finally do it for us. Episode 225 of On the Wire. On behalf of Kevin Hasting, I am Adam Howe. And thanks for listening. We bid you goodbye.